connection between the physical body and physical healing and our environment. Our environment being the biosphere, like the atmosphere and the geosphere, the earth, the hydrosphere, the body of water and the hydrological cycle, the heliosphere, which is the sun, right? And the cosmos, like how is that all connected, right? Well, one thing is that when you realize that your cells are actually mapping out the trajectory of the stars, then you start to realize, like, whoa, that's interesting. Okay, so you mean that there's an astrological coordination within my biology that is directly connected to the cosmos, basically. That's why astrology actually is real. Yeah, because the moment of your birth, when you're born into this atmosphere, you're in a sterile environment called your mom's womb. You're in a sterile environment. You're completely shielded and protected from oxidizing forces. Like our atmosphere, like gravity, it's an oxidizing force. That's the one thing that nobody can explain about, like, are we really human? Are we really from here? Why is it once we're born, automatically our biological clock starts ticking and we start oxidizing? You know what I mean by oxidizing?
Could you explain that?
Oxidizing is basically like, it's like corroding or it's deconstructing, it's catabolizing. So when you, for example, it's like so if you take like an apple or something and you cut it in half, all of a sudden it's going to start oxidizing. The shielding of the pectin and the skin of that apple gets pierced, and then all of a sudden oxygen from the environment pierces through that shield, and now it starts to degrade the structure or the life force of that apple. Does that make sense? Same thing with the human body. If you cut into the body, you cut into the skin, then you create an oxidization, right? That's why your body heals and has a scar or has, callus or scar tissue. That's basically that process. So as we go through more dances around the sun, then the idea is that because of the Earth's atmosphere and because of the gravitational pull, we actually get suppressed by the atmosphere, by gravity, right? So it's kind of an interesting idea, like, where are we really from? And that's a whole other conversation you can kind of tune into. One thing I can definitely say about that is that we are some kind of hybrid being, for sure. There's no doubt about that. Like, that's this hard science is very clear on that. There's things about our DNA code that are unexplainable. And it wasn't that long ago that there was this idea called junk DNA, which is basically like a kind of faulty scientific idea masquerading as science that was trying to explain why 99% of our DNA was unexplainable. It had no known function. They couldn't figure out what the functionality was, so instead of actually trying to figure it out, a bunch of materialistic scientists were just like, well, it's junk DNA. It's non-protein coding DNA. It has no usable function. In fact, Richard Dawkins said that it's quite a shame that 99% of our DNA doesn't seem to have any real function. It's like, okay, that's really an interesting perspective from a scientist. Isn't your inquiry in life to figure out the unexplainable truths of life, not to make up explanations to explain why you don't know something? And that theory has been the theory that's been running the mind of humanity. When you start to actually understand that, then it becomes a whole different, like, you start to look at the psychology running the world. It's kind of like an atheistic scientismic kind of religion that's kind of like materialism and like nihilism. Like, life has no meaning. There's no God force, whatever that is. There's no spirit. There's nothing really real about it. Like, a rock is a rock, a plant is a plant, a human is a human. It's just a bunch of wiring of neurocircuitry and brain chemicals and hormones that are just producing these, like, whatever, irrational behaviors. But there's no spirit. There's nothing living. That's a silly idea, right? That's literally the entire paradigm of our world. If you then you reverse engineer that, why we are living in the situation we are, why we have these concepts of, like, allopathic healing. that excludes anything that has to do with emotions. It excludes anything that has to do with like your psychology. Like, could your mind be affecting anything going on in your brain, or I mean your body? Is that reasonable? Has anyone ever had a thought and then they felt like really not so great in their body? Wow, interesting. Didn't take a whole science experiment to figure that out. Right? It's crazy. Like, spirit wouldn't have it. Your spiritual health and your faith wouldn't have anything to do with your state of well-being, would it?